Hope you're doing well today. I'm Elizabeth Corey, and I'm the founder of beatingtrauma.com. And today we are going to have another discussion about trauma. And I particularly want to do a little bit of focusing on memories today because I posted something about memories the other day, and it certainly did get some interest, some comments, and some questions around that idea of memories and how they play into our recovery. So I want to talk a little bit about those today because this is something that's really near and dear to my heart, is the idea that even for those of us who remember a lot of our experiences, we may not remember everything that happened. I find actually that a lot of times there are bits and pieces missing from our conscious awareness of our traumatic experiences. And then for those of us, and this was my story, who have almost no recollection of childhood, that is telling us that there is quite a lot of traumatic activity that we don't remember. Okay, so I bring this up because I've had many, many conversations with people who say, and this goes for therapists and people like that also, who say that recovering memories is not necessary for our healing. And I vehemently disagree. So I'll just set the stage right there for that one. And then we're going to talk about ways that we try to block our own ability to get to our memories. I will say that a lot of memory blocking is happening with the controller. So this may not sound very surprising to you. So I want to talk a little bit about what are some of the strategies that the controller uses. And remember, these are going to be mind-based strategies to convince us that not only memories aren't there, but that the memories don't matter. Okay? Because remember, a lot of times when we've blocked memories, we've blocked those memories now for decades, right? This is, it could be something that happened yesterday, but generally speaking, it isn't. We've been using this way of dealing with our trauma for decades. So convincing ourselves, or our parts, and especially the controller, that it is not necessary to do that anymore is not an easy job. We have a ton of defenses in place to try to block these things, and I'll be honest, it feels life or death to the parts that are doing the blocking, right? So there's so much fear behind this. So even though the things I'm going to say to you today that the controller says to us are going to sound sort of like logic-based, they're not. They are highly fear-based. There's a lot of controller fear involved in all of these defenses that I'm going to talk about today. But I want to talk about it because so many of us are telling ourselves these things, and it does keep us stuck. Not entirely stuck, okay? Yes, there is work we can do on our healing without getting the memories back. We can make a difference in how we live in the world without them. However, with them, it changes everything. So I want to talk about, at the very end, I'm going to talk a little bit about why that is, because it's going to play into one of the defenses. But for now, I was going to talk about the defenses in particular that I have heard, or my clients have heard over the years, when they start kind of tapping into memories. The first one is so important. For so many reasons. So the first one I want to talk about today is going to be when the controller says to you, you have no proof or no evidence. Okay, so that's number one. I want to also say hello to Trish and Jan. Thank you guys for being here. But this message that you have no proof or evidence is so ingrained in us that oftentimes if we start to get a sense that maybe something happened, it can just pop right into our head, almost like instantaneously. It's like so fast. If you are telling yourself that you have no proof or no evidence, this is a major red flag that you have memories you don't currently have access to, okay? Because that messaging had to come from somewhere. Your controller didn't make that messaging up. I like to tell people this: when you're telling yourself something on the inside, it's because it was told to you. Okay? We don't make up our defenses. They come from somewhere. So then the question becomes, who told you you had no proof? And this is a much better question to be asking ourselves than whether or not we have proof about a memory, is where did we learn that we didn't have proof about a memory? And where did we learn that the proof actually even mattered? Okay? I want to be really clear about this, because your memories are your memories. You don't need proof or evidence. Like, when you get a memory back, you're not standing in a court of law trying to get a judge to tell you it's acceptable to have that memory. No, you're just sharing with yourself, right? So if you hear this message, it is like, flashing red lights are going off in my work, in the way that I work. What that tells me immediately is that somebody has told you that you needed proof in order to remember something that happened to you. Okay? No, you don't. You don't need 1 ounce of proof. You just need to know that your parts are talking to you. Now, this is a big part of this, is developing self-trust. And I'll be honest, self-trust does not just pop up overnight. It takes time, right? But one of the best ways we can start that process is to question, where did I learn that I needed proof to remember something? That doesn't even make any sense. And the truth is, it actually doesn't make any sense, right? And another point I want to make about this is, what if the proof is in the emotions you have and the actions you feel urged to take? Because I'll be honest, without the memory, maybe the emotions seem odd, right? Maybe you're having a strong reaction to something. Maybe you're invalidating yourself by saying, why would I feel that way? Which we'll talk a little more about. Or maybe you have this urge to take this really, really strong action where you can tell deep in your heart, this makes no sense for the circumstances, but it feels so, so important for me to do it. That is your proof, okay? That is the proof that there's something there. And I love it when I hear this from my clients. They're like, yes, I don't have proof that this happened. I can't just, find evidence or photos or something that show this kind of thing happened. But what I can do is I can feel how I feel, and I can feel what it is I want to do with that feeling. And that would only make sense if something like this happened, okay? That is such an important way to start thinking about memories, because there is this bit of self-trust that comes in when we start to do that. So that's the first one, okay? And I have several. That one's a big one, and I spent a lot of time on it, so we'll see how this goes as far as, hopefully I won't have to rush too much, but that's a big one. The next one, the controller may say that you are copying something else, okay? So this could be that you're copying a person's story, or you're copying a TV show, or you're copying a movie or an article that you read. But the controller, if you do kind of start to question whether or not something has happened to you, the controller will try to make you feel like you picked it up somewhere else, okay? And they'll really put a lot of their focus on that idea. Like, you heard this somewhere else, you picked this up somewhere else, and now you're copying it, okay? But the truth is that if something moves you, right? If something stirs something deep inside of you, okay, yes, there are some small instances where it's just you really feel for that person. But a lot of the time, there is this sense of recognition that actually creates that movement, okay? So I want you to take that in for a minute. Like, if there are stories that you feel constantly pulled towards again and again and again, or stories that you're like, I will never, ever go anywhere near that story again, which is going to be a controller way of blocking. But a lot of times we are drawn to these stories. We are really drawn to them. Those may be familiar in some way to you. And that's really what we want to let ourselves get out of that. Like when we're like, that story feels just very recognizable to me. That matters. Okay? So that's the second way that the controller will make us doubt ourselves with our memories. The next one is they may say to you, you are always making things up, or you are a liar. Now, the first question we should ask ourselves if we hear that message coming from the controller is that really true? And I'll be honest, this one can also be a karma kid one as well. But is that really true? Do you really make lots of things up? And the reason I want you to ask that question of yourself is because so many times that liar message only comes out when we start to remember something from our past, right? So who was it that initially told you you were a liar about your memories? That's the question we want to ask. So when we think, am I making this up? Am I lying about this? Flip that question to, whoever told me I was lying about this? Okay? That's the better question to be asking. Because a lot of times, the people that I meet on this journey, especially people who are my clients, they're the most truthful people I've ever met. Like, in all honesty, they are driving towards the truth. I mean, they're pushing to get to the truth. They want the truth more than they want anything in their lives. And then we'll be talking and they'll be like, oh my gosh, I must be lying about this. And I'm like, what? I've been heard many lies come out of your mouth. So this is important because it's such a dichotomy. It's such a weird difference to who you are. A lot of the times when you hear that you're a liar, it's like, does that really make sense? Because the truth is oftentimes children in these kind of families are the only ones telling the truth, right? But they have this liar thing kind of used against them, right? And then it gets internalized, and the controller or the karma kid uses it against us, right? So question that when you hear it. The next defense that I want to talk about is that you will often hear that you are trying to explain your emotions or some kind of label or some kind of diagnosis, okay? So if you do have a diagnosis, that is maybe some kind of personality disorder or something, that is sort of the medical and psychological community's way of kind of figuring out what to do with trauma, right? So you may have one of these things, and you maybe have your controller telling you that if you remember something, it is just a way of explaining away your diagnosis or your label or just your emotions in general. So we will often hear this, oh, you just want to think that what's wrong with you is coming from this trauma thing over here. Okay. Well, the first truth I want to say is it is. Like, personality disorders in general are like almost always associated with traumatic experiences. Okay. But controllers don't really want to look at it that way. And the medical community and the psychological community has been developed generally by controllers. So they sort of, support each other in that way. And we have been invalidating our emotions forever. Like, we learned that when we were very young. Because a lot of times in families where there is abuse that's happening, where trauma is happening around us, oftentimes there won't be an invalidation or a lack of acceptance for the trauma. There will be an invalidation, a lack of acceptance for your response to the trauma, which is very often emotionally driven, right? So we've learned from a very young age that the problem isn't what's happening. I mean, it can't be the problem because my family told me that wasn't the problem. So the problem must actually be the way I'm responding to life. And so this gets us into this loop of, I have these emotions, I shouldn't have these emotions. there must be something wrong with me, right? And then we get into the psychological and medical communities, and they go, yeah, that's true. Like you're got all this emotion. You're so emotional. You're so sensitive. Something must be wrong with you, right? And we hear this again and again and again and again. So not surprisingly, the controller then uses that against us and says, oh, you're only thinking you're remembering this because you want an answer. You want an excuse for why you feel the way you do. No, you feel the way you do because there's been trauma. I can promise you. Whether you remember it or not, there's trauma there. That's why we have intense emotions. That's why we get diagnosed with personality disorders. We have trauma, right? So that's the next one. That's the next defense against the memories. If you're still with me, by the way, kudos to you, because boy, controllers do not want you to hear this. So way to go staying with me. It's only going to get worse from here. From a standpoint of if you're feeling your controller very intensely, if you're feeling dissociated, do try to ground, because the next few are also kind of biggies. I mean, all of these are biggies, but the controller is going to feel threatened by every single one of the things that I am telling you today. I promise. So thank you for sticking with me. I am actually I'm going over to this particular live stream on a computer so I can see this comment. Being drawn to stories, recognition just brought up such emotion for me. Yeah. So, Jan, when you feel that way, really take a minute to go, oh, what are those stories I get drawn to? What are those stories I get drawn to and I immediately dismiss them? Those are important stories. Okay, so. All right, so the next one I want to talk about is, and this is a really popular one too, lots of people don't remember. That is true. And that may be one of the only true ones in this whole list that I'm talking about. Yeah, lots of people don't remember. That is accurate and that is true. We will often try to normalize a lack of memory, and we'll normalize it by saying this is a common problem. Okay, and we may also say, the controller may also say that trauma can't be that common, but a lack of memory is. So we sort of normalize it and say they can't be related. No, trauma is an extremely common thing, and the lack of memory is also an extremely common thing. Now, I am not saying that missing an entire childhood of memories is necessarily common, but I don't know. I'm not going to say it's not either. But I do think that memories being repressed, dissociation in general, is highly, highly normal. I think so many people are doing it. Because even if you have 90% of your childhood memories, how do you even know you have them all? And we've proven this. The military has proven this. You can forget being tortured. I've had clients who have forgotten an acute car accident, but have remembered a lot of other things, okay? Either way, memories going away is an extremely common thing. It is a way that human beings have learned to survive in a fairly scary world. Let's face it, it's not. There's a lot of lack of safety in this world that we live in general. And so I think it's so important when you hear lots of people don't remember. That's no big deal. Just because something is common doesn't mean it's okay. I see this on memes all the time. People are like, just because people agree with you doesn't mean that it's right. That's actually true. So I really want to stress that this is not a reason to think that your memory recovery is, or that you have any memories that are missing or that you need to recover them. Okay, so Carol is saying, my controller told me today that there's no way I could have forgotten this much trauma. Oh my gosh, Carol, my controller tells me that all the time. Okay, and they still sometimes try it. I mean, I've gotten to the point in my work, because I have at this point recovered probably at least 1,000 memory. I'm going to guess I'm hitting the 4 figures at this point. I've got to be. I've not counted, nor will I. But it is a lot of memory recovery at this point. And still my controller will try to tell me, well, this couldn't possibly have happened. I'm like, oh my goodness. They just don't give up. But yes, as a matter of fact, the thing about forgetting is that we only forget when it is bad. So you're going to forget the trauma. You're not going to forget the other stuff. I call them the controller memories. The controller memories of the other stuff. The stuff where everything was, okay, tolerable, Like I think in my childhood, I remembered a few Christmases and a couple trips to amusement parks. That's about it. Those were the moments that were fine, right? So, yeah, and Lena's saying not okay. Tell me more about what you mean there is not okay. I mean, yes, I agree. It's not okay to block our memories. Or it might be your controller saying it's not okay to go down this road. But tell me more about that. So we're going to talk about the next one. The next one starts to get into some, I don't know, highly emotional stuff. There's a lot of people who have a lot of very strong feelings about this particular one, which is that, these are probably false memories. Okay. I am not going to sit here today and get into the science behind memories, because that's not what I'm here to do. But I am going to tell you just a few little tidbits about false memory, to kind of help you question it a little bit more, because I think that's important. First, I just want to say, Lynn is saying, to me, it's not okay to not remember. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you there. We got to remember. So, the first thing I want to say is that if you heard of the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, or false memory syndrome, when you were still a child, ask yourself, why in the world would anybody be motivated to teach me about false memory syndrome when I was 10? Okay, I ask you to consider that, because I knew about false memories and defamation of character when I was practically in diapers. There is absolutely no reason why anybody should be talking to me about that if everything was just fine. So ask yourself the question, how was this idea used against me? The truth is, the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, which has recently and quietly disbanded, was used to spread tons of lies to protect predators. The people who started the foundation were predators. The people who funded the foundation were predators. And Elizabeth Loftus was full of crap. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say about that particular topic, because believe me, I could go on and on and on and rage and rage and rage, and we don't need to be doing that today. So, but what I do want to say is, yes, the mind can make things up. And the mind does make things up. As a matter of fact, ironically, every single thing that I'm talking about that the controller says to us is actually the mind making things up. Believe it or not, our defenses are actually the mind lying to us, right? And it's because we internalize all the lies from our childhood. So yes, the mind does make things up. Okay, I'm not here to deny that. I don't want to get into scientific experiments where this person was shown this thing and then they thought this. And no, because that's not actually where our memories come from. Okay, our memories are not stored here. My frontal lobe can tell you a fairy tale right now, and I will have made the whole thing up. Yes, that is totally possible. I could think that, oh yeah, when I was 6, I had yellow wallpaper, but it was green. Who cares? That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about, the memories we're talking about recovering, they don't live here. They live in the body. They may live in the unconscious to some degree. Some of the stories do live there, but the emotions live in the body, and emotions never, ever lie. Okay? Now, you might argue with me, you might say, but my emotions are intense about things that they shouldn't be intense about. That's right, because those emotions are not about that thing that they just came out about. They're about all the things that happened before that that were similar to that, right? I like to call it tugging on a thread. We're tugging on a thread of a whole lot of experiences that this situation just reminded us of, right? Controller will try to keep it about today, but it isn't, right? So these memories don't come from the mind. They come from the body. They're in the emotions. The emotions are telling us the memories. And that's why these memories are true, right? So when you start listening to all the scientific babble about false memories, which is all made up by predators, remember this conversation today because I promise it's the truth, right? This is where we need to go with it. There's a reason the False Memory Syndrome Foundation disbanded, and it is not because it was credible. I promise you that. So the last thing I want to talk about is something that I heard a few times when I posted my recent meme about remembering. And that message was, you don't even need memories to heal. Okay? I'm going to start this discussion with one question. How are you going to heal something that you don't know what it is about? Okay? That's the question to keep asking yourself. I am not saying you have to remember every single little thing that has ever happened to you and the color of the wallpaper on the walls in order to heal. But the emotion that's associated with the memory lives in the body, okay? It just lives there. It's waiting for you to remember. Again, not all the details, but the gist of what happened to you. And while that emotion lives in the body, it blocks change and forward motion in your life until it has been felt, okay? But the only way we really feel and release that emotion is to hear what it has to tell us. And oftentimes what it has to tell us is the memory. It might not always seem like it's a memory. It might just be words, but it's probably words that were said to you. That is a memory, right? Memories don't run through us like a movie reel. They're often bits and pieces that are driven by emotional expression. But it has a story to tell, and it won't leave and it won't unblock you so that you can make bigger changes in your life until that story has been heard. So again, you don't need to know every little teeny tiny detail associated with a memory in order to process it, but you do need to feel what's there. You need to feel that, and you need to hear what that emotion's trying to tell you, right? So that is what I have for you today. This is a lot. This is a heavy and loaded conversation I'm having with you guys today, which it didn't start off quite like that as far as when I was outlining it, but it really needs to be said because I want people to get on this track, because recovering my memories has been absolutely life-changing for me. Life-changing. And I will say that the changes I've been able to make have happened after I recovered the memories that told me I couldn't, okay? But I had to have the context in order to release it. That is what I have learned. So, Jan is saying, this is such incredible information I've dissociated from so much of my life. This brings the how and why. It's the light and relief. It is a relief to hear this sometimes, and sometimes the controller goes nuts and shuts us down. But I just can't stress this stuff enough. Like it is the way. It is the way forward. It's the way forward for us as individuals, which I'll be honest is all that really should matter to you right now. Put that focus on self, right? And healing yourself and feeling better, because that's so important. But it is also the way we're going to shift this globe. We got to remember the trauma so that we can say, no more trauma. No more of that. I'm done, right? That's what we're doing here. Because they always say about that idea that, history repeats itself. That happens on an individual level too. That's why when we remember, when we bring those memories to the conscious mind, we can then make different decisions. That's what we want, right? So thank you all so much for being here today. as I got on my soapbox about probably what is the most important issue to me when it comes to trauma recovery. And please let me know if this, if you have any questions coming out of this, or this brings anything up for you. You can definitely comment here. You can message me. I'm at Elizabeth@beatingtrauma.com, and that is with an S. I'm the Elizabeth, which can be very confusing for people. So thank you all, and I look forward to hearing from you. Bye.